super excited for another spring ball. 2022, I mean, the weather's actually starting to warm up here in Annapolis, so I think it's perfect timing just for spring football. Our guys have worked hard to this point. I think this new team of 2022 has fed off a lot of our last win against Army, and I think it's carried over into our offseason conditioning. Guys have been working hard. And just excited. We've had some additions of new coaches, and just in the months that we've had them, just their infusion of new ideas, energy, perspective, experience will bring a lot to our staff. Now that we've also seen our schedule, so there's a lot of exciting things. We see our schedule, starting the spring ball. Guys have been working out for a while, and now get to get on the field and practice. It's exciting time.
All right, I'm just going to go right down the line. Mike James.
Hey, Coach. You mentioned the win at the end of last season. Sometimes a big win can help propel you into a season, and sometimes it doesn't. What do you do to kind of focus that energy to kind of keep the momentum going?
Well, you just try to build off, and we had a lot of young guys, Mike, that played in that game, and so a lot of them are back. And so there's only so many things you can tell them about certain games. You try to tell them about the magnitude of the Air Force game or the Notre Dame game, or what it's like to play in South Bend, or what the Army game's like. And so for our guys to go to a game like that, and I've obviously been in a lot of those games. I don't know if it was because of last year or 2 years ago, there wasn't any fans, or we just had the brigade and the Corps, to this past year. I mean, the atmosphere of that game, was as electric as any game that I can remember. And I don't have anything to judge that off. It's just my feeling like, whoa, it just seemed different. A lot of it had to do, 9/11, playing in, New Jersey next to New York City. And so just all of those things, Mike, just building off it. We also got the bad taste too. So we had the guys that we got to see both, and so that's the thing that I've been talking a lot about in the off season. Which one do you want? You recognize, it doesn't matter if you come close to teams and you still lose. This isn't horseshoes. So everybody recognizes the magnitude of a missed assignment, or your eyes in the wrong place, or going to the wrong gap, or blocking the wrong person. Guys recognize that all of those things add up. In and of itself might seem minuscule, but guys recognize that could be the difference in the game, and our margin of error is very thin. If in a lot of games we don't have any. And so that's what we've been trying to build on, like this, just the euphoria of the last game. Okay, you saw what it was like to play against our rivals. And I thought, Mike, we played as hard. When I think about Navy football, as far as effort level, I think of the 2021 Army game and the 2019 Army game. I thought both of those games, just from my effort, Coach Newberry talks about the elite eat. On offense, talk about, running, just great effort running to the ball. I think those are two examples that we're able to draw upon. And so we've used that, but also said it's been also easy, like, okay, that was great, but remember, when we didn't do it right, here are some of the results. And again, just because you came close in some games, this isn't horseshoes. So that's what we've been trying to do. Just, it's a new team, hopefully build off some of the positives, hopefully use some of the things that they saw that they don't want to have happen again, kind of catapult them to making sure they're detailed and stuff, touching the line, and having some attention to detail in their training.
You mentioned how young the team was in that game. And really, last year's team is the youngest Navy team I can remember. And just looking at the depth chart now, it's still a pretty young team. What happened to kind of reach that point? Usually Service Academy teams, you try to be senior dominated, for a few reasons. What happened to that kind of created this situation, and how can you kind of, mitigate that?
Uh, we hit a a once in the century pandemic. I mean, honestly, we had a lot of kids that just, it was tough. So we had kids leave. It's just during the pandemic. It was tough. Our kids during the time, there's a class at the prep school. They didn't leave for a couple months while everybody else at home. So there was a lot of attrition during the pandemic. And so it was nobody's fault. It's just, the pandemic, and so we were talking about just watching the cut-ups, we're looking at the Marshall game and why do we do this? And then we're looking at all these guys that never played before. I'm getting mad watching some of the things that Ty did, like, oh, this is Ty's first start. He's a sophomore, And so and then it is what it is, but a lot of it was the pandemic. We lost a lot of kids during that time. But we are hopeful that some of our growing pains from last year will pay dividends this year because we had a lot of young kids play.
Thanks, Coach.
Scott, we'll do 2 questions each, and then I'll come back around. Scott Wyckoff.
Coach, can you get more done on the field in the spring with so many returning players that played such an important role at the end of last year? That make things more efficient for these few weeks in spring practice?
I guess I'll kind of answer that, Scott, because it's kind of based off kind of Mike's question too. You want to build off it, but you don't want to assume anything too. You start from ground zero. Every team's different. So Fitz started, from ground zero when we got back in lifting. So even just our teaching, our verbiage, yes, there are some things that that you can build off because a lot of guys played. But you also want to make sure that you're not glossing over things. You want to make sure that everybody's, finally tuned in to everything that's going on. So it's always that balance because sometimes you can put in more than you need to put in. Sometimes you don't put in enough. It's really I don't know what the word is. It's the dilemma of spring ball. You know what I mean? Okay, these guys know, let's move on to this. And then you come back to realize and start, wait a minute, they didn't really have a firm foundation of that. So you always want to start from the ground, making sure that your foundation is solidified. Okay, everybody got that. Okay, now we can move on. And so you feel good about the young guys that are back. They got some experience and you like to press forward. But we have to be super careful of not being overzealous on it, just making sure that everybody's concrete on all of their knowledge of offense, defense, and special teams.
How rewarding is it during spring practice to have these players that we talk about each year that kind of rise up from, not from nowhere, but really make a name for themselves and really moving forward from the spring become such a key player on the team? I would imagine it also helps in giving a goal to those guys to play that much harder, to be that person in the spring.
Well, it's, we had a lot, like you said, a lot of young guys that came back, and they definitely got to get better. Young guys played well, but there's a ton of room for improvement. But then you got your other guys that were on the scout team all year, and they're getting yelled at if they touch Ty or do anything, or if they're not blocking things right on the offensive scouts. So now they get a chance to show what they can do. So it's always an exciting time that way to see everybody what they can do. We've seen some glimpses of it in our fourth quarter workouts. We got some. We don't have as much area space in our indoor facility, so we've been at all of our fourth quarters have been outside. And I'll be honest, I've been here a long time. Some of those mornings were freezing. it was freezing out there, man. They're coming off the water, and so we got to see some of the toughness of our guys. And a lot of why we do that too, because we recognize that our last game could be that cold. Because if it wasn't if we didn't have games that cold, we would try to go indoors as much as we can. But it's also a great barometer because I've played in some cold Army Navy games, but just to kind of see some of the toughness of our kids. So I've seen some of that already, Scott. Even though we haven't played, it's exciting to see some of the young guys put on their pads. And we've seen some leaders already step up already in our fourth quarter workouts and our lifting and running.
Thanks, Coach.
Thanks, Scott.
Phil Bergman.
Coach, as you touched on earlier, new additions to the staff, both on operations side and on the field. Could you just go into detail on some of the new members?
Yes, so on offense, we added Chuck Peterson. You know, for many years, he was offensive coordinator at Air Force under Fisher DeBerry. You know, the guy knows option football as good as anybody. His son Brady Peterson played for us, so you know, Chuck's been around for many years since he left Air Force, and we've really enjoyed his perspective on the offensive side of the ball. You know, Coach Jasper and I come from Coach Johnson's option school of thoughts. Chuck comes from obviously Fisher DeBerry's school of thoughts. Ashley Ingram comes from North Alabama. Coach Dupay obviously learned option football from his dad and some Southern Utah stuff. Mick Urquidis obviously is a product of this program. And Jason McDonald came from Springfield. So we have all these different guys with option background, and they kind of have their hand in things. Coach O'Rourke was on the defensive side of the ball, but has been on the offensive side of the ball ever since I became the head coach, and he's one of our best coaches. So we've had this room of guys that maybe you might look at it a certain way, but having Chuck here has been awesome for us, Phil. And then on defense, we've moved Joe Caniglio to our strikers and Raider position. Joe was super creative, you know, moved them, and he took on some added roles in special teams last year. And he was the reason for some of the big things that happened on special teams. You know, I got to find ways to give him time to operate and let his magic potions formulate a little bit. He doesn't have enough time to mix up all his formulas, you know what I mean? So I say, I have to remind him we're at a service academy, so we don't have all this time. But if we can find ways to give him time to be creative, special teams, and the guy's an excellent football coach. Then also Ryan Crawford in the secondary. Really good football coach. I was coached at the highest level, Wake Forest, coached at Davidson, and also at Harvard. So he knows the type of kids that we work with, and excited about his experience that he'll bring, which will allow Coach Newberry to be more of a walk-around defensive coordinator. So we're excited about that. Also, Danny Payne, you know, in the recruiting side of it. And so, you know, filling for David Mahoney, and he's going to bring a lot, you know, to our program that way. And then we also just add an addition of Josh, who's also going to help us with our video. And so have a lot of good things happening with our program. I'm excited to see how all of this comes together for the last, whatever, like, you know, when you're in the office all the time, well, last 3 months or so, you're kind of getting things together, reviewing cutoffs from last year, getting ready for this year, seeing the personnel. I'm excited to see Phil how of our staff comes together and our team comes together.
And then since we've last talked to you, the schedule came out for next season. Start with Delaware, the American Conference games flip-flopped, Notre Dame and Baltimore, end the season with Army and Philly. What are your initial thoughts?
Well, last year was the third hardest schedule. Ended up, I don't know, being the sixth, and I'm like, surely we'll never play one like that again. And this one is much easier, you know what I mean? So, but hey, well, let's roll. You know, we got quarterbacks that have a year more under their belts. You know what I mean? So, and, you know, Ty's played in some tough places. You know what I mean? I had to burn 3 timeouts, I think, in the first quarter at Notre Dame because we couldn't get a playoff. Because we couldn't get a playoff. And so, you know, he played well against, and I've always thought if you can play well in the Army game under that duress, it normally bodes well for you. If you can function and think in that game, you can pretty much think in all the games. And so to see Ty play that well in that game, the schedule, I guess what I'm trying to say, Phil, the schedule didn't get much easier. But at least we got an experienced quarterbacks, and Xavier played. got some guys coming back, and we'll just roll, man. I mean, Delaware's gonna be tough. So right now, just looking at the schedule, I'm like, I didn't want to look at too long because like, oh, it didn't get much easier. So just right now, just focus on our team and try to get us ready for this year. So I got charged by putting my charge.
Okay. John Schofield.
Hey, Coach, it's John. It's really good to see you. First question, you just mentioned Xavier, and that's kind of a big change from the last time we were doing spring ball, and that Xavier is currently scoring goals for Joe Amplo. We talked to Coach Amplo about how that whole thing went down. From your perspective, what's special about this opportunity for him, to kind of bring back those days of Karl Tamulevich and two-way athletes who would see themselves on the football field and on the lacrosse pitch. Seeing him out there looks really good, but you've got to be a little bit worried about an injury, maybe.
Well, he's got injured already, so he's got injured a couple times, but I don't expect too much of it, John, because it's hard enough to play once. It's hard enough to play in our league. You know what I mean? So it's not going to be like, we're going to have a team that's a ton of guys playing dual sports. It's just too hard to do. We got a recruit coming in that it came down between us and those other guys up north. And he's a track guy too. And, he wanted to be able to do both. And I've normally never done that before. But I don't know if as I've gotten older, I don't know if I've got with the NIL stuff, with just, having players have more rights, so to speak, and like, you know what? So I'm more open-minded to it. Not saying that everybody is able to do it. Like if somebody tells you, hey, yeah, I want to go on the basketball team, and you're like 16 out of 15 guys, like, no, just stay over here. Or if you're going to run track and all you do is practice, but you don't really factor in the meets or anything, then just stay over here and play football. But obviously Xavier is an elite lacrosse player, and this young man I'm talking about also is an elite football player and, a top track guy. So, I'm more open-minded to allowing guys to do that, but also recognizing, John, that it's not like the floodgates are going to open, because Cincinnati's still coming, Houston's still coming, Air Force still coming. You know what I mean? The league is still getting tough, so it's hard to divide your schedule and your workout, so to speak, so you can be elite at football. But I feel like Xavier also deserved it and earned it. He didn't do it as a freshman. He worked his butt off for 2 years. He still comes to some meetings, John. So he's been amazing. I mean, he comes to some meetings as much as he can. Happy for them. Had a big win this past week, scored a goal, and a big win, versus Johns Hopkins. So, I'm happy for Xavier, happy for Coach Amplo and our team. But he recognizes, Coach Amplo does, and I do, and other, track coach, Coach Cook, that it's not going to be it's more an exception than the norm.
And then second from me, or last from me, we talked to Chet at the end of the football season, at the end of the big win over Army, and obviously the mood was good and everyone was happy and everyone was looking forward to what we were going to do next. Can you kind of characterize, because he had an interesting way of framing it, like he deferred a lot of these to you, but also talked about how you've come together and talked about, what could change programmatically going forward so that we didn't have the struggles that we had at the beginning of last season, which, albeit, as you mentioned, came against an unbelievably hard schedule. But can you kind of characterize how you and the athletic director have kind of focused your vision on the next season coming up?
Well, I've had great discussions with Chet and also our administration. And just some hard, honest discussions. Okay, the other two are, because it's like, okay, in my mind, there's two different things. There's our league, obviously, which is really, really hard. But we recognize we're not going to do some of the things that Houston and we're and SMU or people in our league are going to do, just as far as who we are. We're different people, but Air Force and Army are doing some things that we need to look at to make sure that we're on a level. All of my discussions have been, I just want to be on a level playing field with them. I don't want to, I'm not saying we have to have bigger, but if they're doing certain things that's creating a competitive advantage, we cannot let that happen. And so very productive meetings that we had, you know what I mean? And like I said, Chet and I have been together for a long, long time. And so our discussions were very honest. We also recognize that our league is not the same. I got a picture that I showed them just outside of our, right down the hallway where, Chris Swain is taking a run against Memphis. I think Memphis was ranked at that time when we beat them. Memphis doesn't look like that anymore. They showed a couple guys chasing them like, Memphis even looks a little different from that team. And so our league has gotten much better during that time. And the other two have gotten better and they're doing things. And so our discussions have been, John, are like, okay, they're doing this. Can we do this? Can we, from academy standpoint? But I've always told our administration and Chet, I'll never compromise who we are. Because it's not even, as much as I love this school, it has nothing to do with the Naval Academy. It's just me. I'm a person of integrity. I don't want to cheat. I don't want to do anything morally to look. I know I've been here, John, a long time. I can go to sleep at night. I don't go to sleep at night when, I better go shred those papers before the NCAA finds it, or, you know what I mean? There's nothing like that. And so I just always said, anything I'll fight for is because the other two are doing it and it's legal, and we can't lose a competitive advantage, which, like I said, Chet and our administration totally gets. I just want to make sure they're aware of all this stuff. Sometimes I don't know if they're aware of all the different things. And there were productive conversations. So I felt good coming out of my conversations with Chet and also our administration about things we need to do to stay competitive in our league and also with our two rivals, for the Commander-in-Chief Trophy.
Thanks, Coach.
Wags.
I know you won't name captains till the end of spring, but during off-season workouts, both lifting and, the conditioning, some of the seniors that are emerging as leaders in your view?
I believe so, Wags. I've been impressed. We discuss personnel every day. So, and plus, during the off season, basically our off season life is a really boring one. So we come in early, we have staff meeting, go over things, then we break up offensive, defense, discuss football stuff. It's either cut-ups or professional development, go visit people or you get ideas. And then the other part is recruiting. And the last part is looking at your own players. So we watch guys go left, we watch them run, just because we're just trying to gather data. And so I've been just impressed, Wags, with our seniors coming back. Kind of to Mike's question early on, we don't have a ton of them. We lost a ton of kids, man. It's just the way it was. But the guys that are still here, I know this, if you stayed through all of that, you're a pretty tough kid. And I've been impressed with, even though the numbers are small, they're a really strong group, Wags. And even some of our younger guys that played, I think they've earned some respect too, Wags, some of the younger guys that played. But they also recognize that it's more than anything you say, it's what you do. And so, we've been lifting and running and guys encouraging each other to see guys run. We did the fourth quarters, which is awesome. But also they want to see you practice too now. You can't be a guy that's saying everything, but you're not running to the football or you're not playing with great effort. So the leadership component, the resume to become a captain is still being filled out. And so I think there are a lot of good candidates, a lot of guys doing good things, but it's still a work in progress for a lot of that.
But you don't want to mention any particular seniors that have impressed you?
Yeah, I guess on the defensive side of the ball, the Adams twins are always awesome. I mean, they work really, really hard, and I've always been impressed with Terrell and Josh, and also Nick Straw is a hard worker. Will Harbor's not a senior, but he's a guy that, constantly works hard. On the offensive side of the ball, it's kind of interesting, our group. I mean, we don't have a lot of talk. Mark Walker's been working hard. He's shown a great example. Our A-back group is a hard-working group of A-backs. Again, they don't say a lot of stuff, but you see a lot of leadership in there. The linemen, how do I put this? And it doesn't change, it's the same all the time. The linemen are just trying to catch their breath in the workouts. You know what I mean? It's hard for them to, to cheer on somebody else, when you're trying to just make it through a workout. So, they're doing some decent things. Ty's not really a raw kid. You know what I mean? That's not really his deal. I've been impressed with Kai Rojas. But there have been some younger guys too, right? I mean, they've been working hard. Like I said, Daniel Jones, Mikhail Hayward's been doing a good job. Anton Hall and Logan Point. There've been quite a few. Jaden Umber been good. John Marshall, Evan Gibbons. So I'm just naming a ton of guys, but I don't know if anybody's kind of separated themselves. So it's hard for you to write art but I've been impressed. Like, there's been a lot of guys working hard. So that's always a good sign. When you have a ton of guys working hard. But like I said, the thing that I think's really helped us to Mike's first question is they've tasted it. They've tasted what a hard-fought, sweet victory is like, and they want more of it. They're hungry for more of that. So all these guys are pushing. So I've been encouraged by that.
Last year, due to the circumstances, or I should say last spring camp, due to circumstances, you were very physical. What is your thoughts along those lines? Do you think you want to have some really physical practices? And will quarterback, I guess Ty won't be live, would he?
Yeah, well, I look back at it. I mean, when I go back and look at our practice, it wasn't probably any different than any spring ball. We just actually had a normal spring practice. When I look back, we're going to have a physical practice. And I went back and looked at it. I mean, I looked at other spring balls besides the pandemic one, where we didn't have spring practice wags. And so I think we'll continue to do that, going against each other as much as we can, but also being smart. There's a lot of rules in place that I think are good for us coaches, so we can make sure that, you want to keep guys safe too. It doesn't do any good to be physical and nobody can practice. We won't tackle Ty this year. This spring ball. I've seen how physical he is. I think, and I've said this in the earlier call, I really believe his first touchdown run, set the pace for that whole Army-Navy game last week. Basically, both of their safeties filled him in a hole, who are really good players. I thought their safeties are really good players. And they hit him at the 2-yard line, and he ran them both over and got in the end zone. And so I know how physical he is. I don't need to see him do anything physical. Now, everything else besides tackling, Wags is going to do. And so we're going to look at Masai too. He's going to get a lot more reps. Xavier getting limited reps and being lacrosse. I think it's a great opportunity for him. We're also going to look at Kai Rojas at quarterback. He was a quarterback in high school. So we're excited to see what he can do. He was obviously one of our starting A-back. So we'll see. We're just, what spring allows you to do is dabble a little bit. And with Xavier not being here, it allows us to give Masai more reps, look at Kai Rojas, and also some of our younger quarterbacks, from Isaiah to Zach to also Cameron, to get a shot too.
Big picture, do you expect to install, without giving away state secrets, do you expect to do defensive and offensive installation of some new schemes?
We always do. We always, again, spring is always the time you dabble in different things, and we'll definitely do that, Wags. We visit people visit us, we call people call us. I mean, that's what you're doing all season. You just gotta be careful, make sure you don't tinker too much, but it's always what we do. And hopefully some of the new additions or subtraction of stuff will lend to a good, 2022 team when we open up against Delaware.